Citizen Talks is a podcast series featuring discussions with humanitarians, activists, artists, and changemakers, exploring the global humanitarian issues that shape our society, the world at large. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Citizen Talks. I am your host, Minkailu, and today we are very, very lucky to be joined by Sarah Agha. She is an actor and a writer based in the UK. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we always like to begin by getting a little bit of background on you for our guests who may not be familiar with you. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So I'm predominantly an actor, but I also do a lot of writing freelance, and I also do presenting and film curation. So I do quite a few different things, but what I find is that all of them sort of feed into each other. So acting would have been my first passion, but you have to supplement acting with other things. And I absolutely love writing, and I love film, but I'm not a director. I don't have any aspiration to make films, but I love finding exceptional cinema, especially from the Arab world, and programming it or writing about it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool. So what realms of acting are you in primarily? Is it film, television, theater?
Yeah, I'm fortunate to have done all three.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've done quite a bit of theatre, a bit of television, and a bit of film as well.
Which one's your favorite?
Oof, I mean, they're sort of not comparable. I would say if theatre didn't exist as a medium, I don't think I would feel the urgent desire to be an actor. Like, theatre is something else. Like, it's so thrilling. It's a true craft as well. Not to say that screen work isn't, but it's just the live aspect and the way that everything is in the room and you have a live audience and things can go wrong. There's that adrenaline, there's that risk factor, it's higher stakes. Especially if you get a great text. You know, if you're in a bad play, then it's a little bit more complicated. But if you're lucky enough to get a great cast, great director, and great text, there's nothing like it.
Okay.
And then screen work is exciting too, but it operates in a totally different way.
So if you had to say, like, across your entire body of work, which one specifically? Like, what thing that you've worked on has been your absolute favorite?
So I would say my favourite job so far was when I worked at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I think the reason why it meant so much to me was that I didn't go to drama school, so I went to university, I studied theology, always wanted to be an actor, I was hell-bent on it, but my parents were like, no, you have to get a degree first and then you can pursue it. They assumed that I'd give up on it, to be honest.
Yeah, of course.
So I was fortunate enough to get a role at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I started off understudying, and I got into that company having not gone to drama school. So for me, this was like my drama school. I used it as a fantastic opportunity to learn from other actors, to really hone my craft, because I didn't have the opportunity to do a 3-year degree in theatre and performance and to learn all about Shakespeare and iambic pentameter and all these things that are essential if you want to, do the classics. So for me, it was a very special job. I was in a play called King John, and I was understudying, but then I had the opportunity to go on, I think 36 times across the run. So I was quite lucky. And I've done great work since then, but this one always has a sort of special place in my heart because I was just so delighted to do it. It had been on the list for years, Royal Shakespeare Company, and I'd love to go back,
Right. So I'm curious because, as an actor, a lot of times from an external person's perspective, you think that someone who's involved in the industry that their goal is fame, big Hollywood, movies, their name on the title of the film, etc. This kind of thing. We're all familiar with it. But for someone who's not necessarily in that realm of acting, like theater, for example, like what feels like success to you?
It's a really good question because I think it has changed as I've got older and as I've learnt more.
Yeah.
And I suppose everyone has a different image of what success is. And for me, when I was younger, being perfectly honest, the things that you've described would have seemed very alluring, and I think it's one of the main reasons why a lot of people pursue acting. They think Hollywood, your name in lights, and all these things that seem so glamorous and exciting. But if that's the only thing that you want from it, you really ought to do something else because it's hard. That's something I've really found. Acting is really hard. Being able to stay in the industry, to stay fulfilled during the quiet times, to deal with the the many times that you don't get the role, to not take it personally, to keep going, to keep learning, to keep developing, to keep reading. If you just want fame, you ought to just go on reality TV.
Yeah, right.
You can't.
You don't have enough of those.
Yeah, so for me, I think I'm fortunate now to have reached a point where I can choose what I do and I can say no to things. So if I don't believe in a project for whatever different reason, then I can say no. And I think 10 years ago, I thought maybe you have to say yes to everything.
Right.
Whereas now I know that it's not the be-all and the end-all if you don't do a certain project. And if it's going to make you unhappy, or if it goes against your principles, whatever they are, everyone's different, everyone has their own sort of red lines, then it's not worth it. And that's why I want to spend more time writing now as well, because then you have a little bit more control and agency over the work that you put out into the world, as opposed to waiting for the phone to call and sort of jump on board someone else's project, which can be exciting, as I said, when the text is great. But if you don't believe in the text, or you don't believe in its message, then it can be quite disorientating if you feel that's what you have to do all the time.
Right.
So for me, Globe, Royal Shakespeare Company, the National Theatre, working on a great play with great people, that's success for me. If it makes me happy and if it touches people. If you are lucky enough to be part of a production where the audience come and they feel something, and especially if it's plays about Palestine or about social justice or things that are really important to us and we want to find ways to communicate, if you can reach an audience through theatre, film, art, storytelling, poetry, whatever it is, to me that's also success. It isn't just, the massive paycheck or the opportunity to be in an enormous film, it's...
Right. There's a lot of things you said there I want to get into, but first I want to ask something that I've always been sort of curious about. Don't talk to that many actors, so I get the sense, of course, as we mentioned, right, in Hollywood, et cetera, the glamour, the glitz, the sort of ideal of perfection, that's kind of the narrative that's pushed with actors in that particular profession. But I get the sense, just, I guess, casual observation, experiences that I've had in my life, that a lot of the sort of people in the industry are driven by actually insecurities. Do you find that that's the case? Has that ever been sort of the case for you personally?
Yeah, it's an interesting observation. I would say I have a lot of love, obviously, for my profession, and I have such great friends who are actors, obviously. I've met some extraordinary people over 10 years of acting. But sometimes you do find there is a particular type of person who gravitates towards performance. And it isn't always driven by insecurity, but yeah, all I can say is you do meet a range of interesting people. Some people carry a lot of pain with them, or a lot of baggage, and for them, embodying a character or adopting a new role, that for them is quite cathartic, because if you struggle to communicate or express your pain in your own life, it makes you feel vulnerable, you don't want people knowing your business. If you can embody a character that's going through a different type of pain or trauma, but you can relate to it on some level, it's quite cathartic actually. And I think that's why some of the great actors have sometimes been through some quite bonkers things in their life or quite extreme circumstances that they can then bring to different roles. They don't have to dig too deep or imagine too much. They can bring their own experiences into things. So yeah, certainly.
Okay.
You can edit that bit out.
Certainly, yeah. So I want to ask a bit about your own background. You are very diverse. You are Arab, Irish. How does the interplay of those two identities inform your work? I think especially as a writer, probably. Do you ever feel any kind of conflict there?
So I would say the two identities, as in my Irish heritage and my Palestinian heritage, are not really in conflict with each other. If anything, sometimes they...
Yeah, get along quite well,
yeah,
actually.
Exactly.
No.
Sometimes they reinforce each other in a quite surprising way.
Amazing.
What I would say, though, being brought up in London, in the UK, always feeling slightly different, but not always knowing why, that sometimes there was sometimes some conflict there in terms of understanding myself, my place in the world, how to express myself when you feel a little bit different, or you feel a bit isolated. Even when you're surrounded by lots of people, it's if people don't understand where you're coming from, it can be, not always easy. But I've gone on a journey with my identity, to be honest, you know?
Yeah.
I think growing up, I always felt I was Palestinian, but I've never been. I couldn't speak the language. You know, even the word Palestine is sometimes deemed to be political, controversial, and that's strange when your very identity is perceived to be political. So what, do you use a different word to describe your ethnicity? Do you say Arab? Sure, that's not inaccurate, but it's not specific. So sometimes it feels like a bit of a lie or a slight evasion to say you're Arab rather than Palestinian, but you might avoid an uncomfortable conversation. Is that worth it? And then when it comes to being Irish, you know, my mother was raised in Scotland, but both her parents were Irish immigrants. She has a very strong Irish identity. If you ask her where she's from, she's an Irish Catholic. She's very proud of her roots, really knows Irish history really well, taught me about that from a very young age. And again, you know, growing up in London, going to British schools, I was the only one who knew about Irish history. And in the classroom, we were told certain things by certain teachers that completely erased Irish history, Irish trauma, the reality of British occupation in Ireland. And so that was quite disorientating, to be in a space where I was the only one that felt I knew the truth, but you're being told by someone in a position of authority that it's not the case. So there was a lot of conflict there. But then I went to university in Ireland and I studied in Dublin, made lots of Irish friends, I've worked there. So I feel a lot closer to my Irish roots now. I have an Irish passport. So despite sounding like this, a lot of people are like, oh, you're English, you're British.
Right.
You know, I'm proud to say, yeah, I'm a Londoner for sure. It's very much part of who I am, but I also have this rich history of being Irish and Palestinian as well to bring to the table, and there's still so much to explore with that as well, so lots to learn.
Cool. Very cool. So why did you decide to, well, first of all, what is the Arab Film Club, and why did you decide to start that?
Thank you. So the Arab Film Club is a community platform, I suppose you could call it. It started in lockdown, so 2020, July. And I'm not someone who can sit still doing nothing. You know, I need stimulation, I need to keep busy. And obviously there was a global lockdown, so theatres were shut, cinemas were shut, a lot of our work and projects were on standstill. And so, you know, I was calling lots of friends, chatting to people, and I was chatting to a friend of mine who's also of Arab heritage, and she's also an actress. And we were saying how often we get asked to audition to play Syrian refugees, again and again and again. And I find it ironic because, as I said, I'm a Londoner, you know, I sound like this, I was brought up in the UK, I'm half white, you know, I'm half Irish. And for some reason, every time or often an audition came in, it would be for a Syrian refugee role. And those stories are important, 100%. And I have family in Syria as well, because, you know, the Palestinian diaspora is spread far and wide. So I have family in Syria. It's an important story that needs to be told and needs to be heard, but there was a period where it was a very popular narrative, often written by the wrong person for the wrong reason. So it was quite disappointing to constantly read these quite offensive scripts sometimes. Not always, there was a few good ones, but just really inauthentic and just strange framing. So I thought, okay, this is frustrating, but we've got to do something about this. You know, we've got to learn, and what can we do to change this?
Yeah.
So I thought, well, why don't we look at what the Arab world is saying, rather than, you know, being told who we are by English or European writers who are writing about us from an uninformed position. What are Arab writers saying? What's the Arab world saying about themselves? So we read a play, Returning to Haifa by Ghassan Kanafani, and we committed to reading a play by an Arab writer every single month for a year. And it was all online, it was all in lockdown. Started off with 5 people online, and it grew and it grew and it grew. Every month someone brought someone new, And it just expanded at a speed I didn't expect. So obviously there's so many plays in the Arab world, but I thought before we run out, let's turn to cinema, let's turn to film. This is another medium that I want to learn more about, particularly because so many plays about Arab issues, films about Arab issues in the West are often written, again, not always by the authentic voice. So that's how it started. We just started watching different films from the Arab world, and it's very diverse. You know, we tried to tick off every single state as we went on until we got through each one, and then went back and uncovered more and more. And once lockdown ended, then we had the opportunity to take it into the physical space. So 1 year after the first session, we organised the first ever screening. So I curated the programme and wrote to lots of different filmmakers around the world who are Arab, but they're sort of dotted in different places. And we got a little bit of funding for that. And again, it sold out in a flash. And that really surprised me because growing up Arab in the UK, I felt quite isolated, you know, and I'm an optimist, I'm not a defeatist person, but I often just felt quite isolated. I didn't know many people like myself or people who had similar influences to myself. And then through the club, I couldn't believe how many other people had similar stories, people who are Arab or mixed, or, you know, and all of them had said how isolated they felt and how they didn't know anyone else who was an Arab and a performer and dealing with all these conflicts in terms of where are our red lines as Arabs and what do we do, what do we not do? So I think that's why it expanded so quickly. So now it's a combination of large-scale events, quite high-profile events, and also I would never want to lose sight of that quite more intimate community feel. So we do everything from small Zoom sessions about a particular film to large-scale events. You know, in the South Bank Centre we had a screening last year, we're doing it again this year with 300 people, again sold out very quickly. So it's quite diverse, and yeah, and the two requirements for the films that we discuss and programme has to be written and directed by someone who is of Arab heritage and they identify as an Arab, and it has to be narrative, it has to be scripted, because so many of us starting off came into this from a performance background. So we wanted to talk about writing, the performance, the camera work, all this. It's not that documentary isn't a medium that I'm interested in, I am, but that's a whole other club. You know, you could have a whole separate club just dedicated to documentary. Yeah. But we do narrative films.
Okay. So what do you think is sort of, more broadly speaking, achieved by sharing these unique narratives with people?
I think it subverts stereotypes and expectations, and I even say that myself, and I'm from an Arab background, and yet I've been surprised again and again by some of these stories, because when you grow up in somewhere like London or America or wherever it may be, and you're told that Arabs are this or Muslims are that, and sometimes the stories can be quite demonizing or dehumanizing or marginalizing, you actually sometimes start to believe that narrative. So what's been really great is not only have I found myself being educated and surprised, and I've learned so much, when we find a film that I believe to be truly exceptional, they're the ones that we program for a London audience and invite everyone. I would never want the Arab Film Club to only be for Arabs. It's not exclusive, it has to be inclusive. So there are requirements as to who's telling the stories, but I really want to reach people outside of our community, because if we just talk to ourselves all the time, the message is not reaching. And actually, some of Arab cinema is truly exceptional, really objectively well-made films, great storytelling, very skillfully created and executed. So audiences of any heritage or people from any profession should come and celebrate this. You know, we have a lot to celebrate, but because we're often in the headlines for some devastating tragedy or trauma or war, conflict, genocide, whatever it may be, depending on the country at the time, sometimes we forget that there's also a lot to celebrate, there's a lot to be proud of, and there's a lot to be said.
Yeah. I actually want to ask about that, like specifically about the Palestinian narrative. Why do you feel that it's been so thoroughly ignored for the most part, by the world for decades now, really. I mean, they've only been, as you said, the subject of discussions around wars and terrible humanitarian tragedies, et cetera, or as terrorists, whatever it may be, from one day to the next. But obviously, Palestinians are people, they're living lives, they're doing things, they have joy, they have love, they have so many cultural, deep historical, cultural benefits to share with the world. But that's never been a focus for the Palestinian people. In fact, they've tried to eliminate the concept of a Palestinian person. What do you think is behind that?
I think there's many factors, and I think I'll start on a positive note to say that I think things are changing. You know, I used to go to screenings of Palestinian films 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and it would be a very small audience. And very often it was the same faces, you know, those who are committed to the cause or in it for the long run.
Right.
I never saw a packed room. And now it's packed rooms. And it's not just Palestinian cinema, it could be art, storytelling, poetry. I mean, even I went to a fantastic talk at the VNA recently that was about Palestinian artists and resisting erasure in a time of genocide and using art, visual art, in order to do that. Again, it was packed. Book launches, if it's a Palestinian writer, they're packed now. So I wanted to start on a positive note because I'm heartened to see so many people come to the cause now, so many people try to learn from Palestinian voices, advocates, artists, journalists, medics. And it's inspiring or heartening to look around the room and see lots of new faces, different ethnicities, different ages, different backgrounds, different professions. This is no longer an issue just for people who are Muslim or Arab or Palestinian. Many people have now come to this cause from all walks of life and all faiths, be it Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and that's really important and that shouldn't be overlooked. Why it's been ignored? I think there's been a lot of propaganda, you know, and a lot of misinformation, and I actually think a lot of people are scared or were scared of Palestine. You know, even when I would say in auditions sometimes, I'm Palestinian or I'm half Palestinian, sometimes there would be like a sort of palpable shift in the room because Palestine is this sort of dark topic, it's controversial, or it was at least, and it still is to a great extent, but things are changing slowly, but only because there's been the most horrific war on Gaza. I mean, it's really disappointing and devastating that it's come to this, and this is where we are, and this is what it's taken in order to encourage people to talk about Palestine or to stop ignoring Palestine. But we are where we are, and we just have to keep going and not succumb to hopelessness.
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say is that, at least since I've been, you know, young or a young adult, the narrative of Palestinian resistance has always been strong. It's always been strong. And for you as a Palestinian living in the diaspora, how do you personally define resistance? And what does it mean to you in the context of art and Palestinian identity?
So I think there are many different ways to define resistance, but for me, something that I'm really interested in is cultural resistance. And that's a term that I learnt when I went to Jenin for the first time in 2014. And I met actors and participants at the Freedom Theatre. And it was really inspiring to meet these young, creative Palestinians who were using art and theatre as a way to resist the occupation, to reject the conditions imposed upon them. And of course, we have to be realistic about the potential effects or impact of art. Realistically, a film is not going to liberate Palestine on its own, or a painting is not going to end the occupation. But I really don't think we should dismiss its power collectively. You know, using art to humanize the struggle, I think, is a really powerful tool. And it's not that Palestinians need to be humanized, because, of course, it goes without saying that Palestinians are human, and we're all human. We're all humans in this world.
It's a very controversial idea in 2025.
The Palestinians are human.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, I think I think something I'd like to say is that being able to write about the human condition is really difficult. Doesn't matter what background you're from. So many writers try to write meaningful plays that have an impact and really touch people's heart or inspire them, or keep them up at night because they're thinking about the characters and the stories, or the anguish or the pain and the inner turmoil. All these things as humans we have to deal with, be it love, loss, grief, marriage, breakups, whatever. These are human emotions and things that come up in life. And so many writers can't do that. So if you're a writer and you're Palestinian and you're able to write about the human condition effectively and creatively and reach an audience, that's very powerful. And then if you use that to then also talk about the occupation, it's a way to encourage people to engage with this topic in a way that isn't daunting, overwhelming, depressing, That's why I love Palestinian cinema. So many Palestinian films have made me cry and they've made me laugh, but they've not made me feel hopeless. They've made me think this is not over. If these Palestinians can make a film under an occupation, with checkpoints, with soldiers, with an apartheid regime, they can complete a project when around the world so many filmmakers don't complete their projects because of funding or because of editing issues or various different things. If a Palestinian can do it on the ground, that's resistance, that's cultural resistance. And a particular project I want to give a huge shout out for is from Ground Zero. 22 short films made by Gazans on the ground from, I think it was January to June 2024. It is such an impressive feat of filmmaking. It's historic. It will go down in history. And I interviewed the director, Rashid Mashawari, who again was a very inspiring person. I feel like I'm using the word inspiring a lot.
If you are inspired, then...
I truly am. It's not a word I use lightly. What an inspiring person to curate this project and to recruit actors, writers, directors on the ground, including women. There was a number of female directors in Gaza on the ground, and children making short films, puppetry, animation, editing them on the ground in tents, using Wi-Fi from the local hospital to send the footage to Europe, rushing to the border to try and pass over a hard drive. I mean, this is resistance.
Yeah.
To make a film under those conditions, it's staggering. And the project, the 22 short films collected together, is staggering. And it was actually longlisted for an Oscar.
Okay.
And it didn't make it to the next round, but the fact that it was there in that mix gives me hope that next year and the following year and the year after that, we're going to see and hear more stories from Palestinians.
Yeah.
This is not over.
I'm definitely going to check that out. So before we go, do you have any final words or thoughts that you think our audience should leave with from this conversation?
I would say it feels like we are enduring very dark times, very dark days. And to be perfectly honest, I've found the last 2 years, or 18 months, very challenging, very overwhelming, very depressing. But I think I've been really heartened to come here to Istanbul and to be at this conference and to be at TRT and to meet so many people with so much energy, charisma, passion. And it reminds me that we all have to keep going, that we are stronger together, community is key, and anything is possible. We just have to not give up and to not succumb to hopelessness, to keep making, creating, speaking, being kind, making new friends. All these are really valuable things, valuable lessons. So I would say, yeah.
Amazing.
Keep going, keep watching films, keep reading and
keep calm and carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so for anyone who might want to check in with you, follow what you're up to, see your work, where can they connect with you?
So the Arab Film Club is at the Arab Film Club on Instagram, and we also have a website using the same name. And I have an Instagram, Sarah Agha online, and I also have a podcast, but that's all connected. So you can find the podcast by looking up the Arab Film Club podcast or via my Instagram.
Okay. Sarah, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. And for all of our listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of Citizen Talks, and we will see you next time.